Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast, an instant reaction episode. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got the whole crew with us, Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, on this Saturday evening, and we've got quite a bit to talk about, boys. The Georgia Bulldogs, number 10 Bulldogs, take care of business. Not exactly what most folks had in mind in a 59-21 victory over UMass. Offense looked great. Defense did not look great. A lot of issues on the defensive side. I'll run through some statistics that stood out before we really talk about this game. 59-21, offense had a lot of success. 550 yards of offense. Carson Beck throws for 297 yards, 4 touchdowns to 4 different receivers. Biggest issue, and what I believe we're going to be talking about quite a bit on this episode, is the defense. Gave up 351 yards of offense, 226 rushing yards. UMass just absolutely gashed them on the ground, though there was also a 75-yard touchdown pass that was given up along the way. Not the prettiest game, and at times in that second half, you sort of went, might get interesting. Never really felt like this game was in upset territory, but at the end of the day, Georgia wins on a Saturday where, to this point in the evening, some of the other teams in the playoff picture were not able to take care of business. So I'll throw it to you first, Ben. You are here as well as I am. We are recording on the Claude Felton level of Sanford Stadium and a couple of the radio booths, having a chance to recap and having watched this game live. So I'll throw it to you first, Ben. What stood out to you about today, and what's on your mind?
Well, what stands out is, depending to me, what side of the ball you want to talk about, because this feels like a script flip from some of the conversations that we've had at points throughout this year or just in past years. But the offense was dominant today. And, Kirby Smart said post-game, I think he downplayed how well the offense played by just saying, it was a bunch of big people on the offensive line blocking a bunch of little people on the defensive line, and it was going to be a dominant performance. But, up until the drive, I think it was Carson Beck's last play of the game when he gets sacked. Was that Carson Beck's last play of the game when he gets sacked on that 4th down? Up until that point, Georgia had scored a touchdown on 6 of 7 possessions, and it had kicked a field goal on the other. And so it was, you couldn't have asked, you could have asked, I guess, for a touchdown drive coming out of halftime, but you don't do that, and Peyton Woodring kicks a 53-yarder into the wind. And so you couldn't have asked offensively for more than what the team gave you right up until that Carson Beck sack on 4th down. And so if you're wanting to talk about the offense, Carson Beck, another clean game. I know Kirby got upset post-game, not upset, but he pushed back on the notion of a clean game post-game just because, he thinks that we look a little bit at the stats too much, and that's probably a little bit fair. But 297 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. I think all 4 of those were in the first half, but I could be wrong on that. But either way, he was sharp. He threw touchdowns to 4 different receivers. Nate Frazier was exactly the guy that everybody has wanted him to be throughout this year. He has 136 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaged over 6.5 per carry. So, you can't look at the offense and have any kind of complaints in this game, even if, as Kirby Smart says, things went as they were supposed to, just based on the differences on the line of scrimmage. If you want to talk about the defense, I think that everyone's going to have some fear this week just because UMass was doing some misdirection stuff. They were changing quarterbacks. And you know what? In 6 days, Georgia's going to be playing probably 2 quarterbacks, and they're going to be doing a lot of misdirection stuff. So I'm sure that anxieties are maybe higher for that game right now than they were 5 hours ago, just because you don't see Georgia defenses give up 226 yards rushing. And they get a lot of times when you see teams put up some gaudy rushing totals, usually they had to run a ton of times to be able to do it. And yeah, UMass ran the ball 40 times, but they averaged 5.7 yards per carry. I just read you Nate Frazier's stat line, and UMass had more yards per carry than Georgia did in this game. And so it's a weird game. And it wasn't just, yes, there were some moments where it was like, all right, 3rd and 4, 2nd and 5, like picking up the short yardage that you needed to do. Yes. There were some big explosives, the 38-yarder on the first possession of the game. Georgia gets in that 3rd down on the first possession of the game. Quarterback keeps, goes for 38 yards, flips the field. That was, I thought right before that moment, I was sitting here thinking, man, Georgia's just going to dominate this unit up front all game long. And then he pulls it, and I feel like that was the confidence boost that UMass needed to say, hey, this is what we do offensively. We can run the ball on these guys. It doesn't matter that they're Georgia. And that's exactly what they did. They chunked off a 22-yard run. I think it was a 68-yarder that they almost house called. And credit to Georgia for, standing up defensively and not allowing a touchdown on that one because, well, credit to Dalen Everett, one, for chasing him down. And then two, credit to the defense for stepping up and making a stop after that play as well, because, if they end up scoring there, the scoreboard could have started to get really, really interesting. I don't think, and I got a lot of, we had the Junkyard. I was getting text messages during the game from Georgia fans. I think there was a lot of, oh no, what do we got to do about this defense, or what has to change before Georgia Tech? And my personal opinion on it is this is one of those games you kind of just have to throw out the tape. Like, yeah, it was bad. Yes, obviously the team's going to film study. Obviously the team's going to look and say, what did we not do well in this game that can be improved for the Georgia Tech game in 6 days? But I think that this was, Kirby Smart said it, this was the kind of a wake-up call. Georgia not playing to its standard defensively. I think that you can apply this game to the Georgia Tech game just as much as you were able to apply the Tennessee game to this game, because, they're just very different football teams, very different games. Obviously the energy in Sanford Stadium and just on the Georgia sideline, Malachi Starks admitted it to me post-game. Like, our passion and energy was just simply not to the Georgia standard. And I think it was a battle of wills early. And I think that UMass won the battle of wills early. And if it wasn't for Georgia just being soul crushing on the offensive side of the ball today, it could have gotten a little bit interesting. But I mean, this goes back to some of the hate and criticism that Georgia's offense has gotten throughout the year. When Georgia needs its offense to play complementary football and get the job done, it has done that more often than not. And I think that even in a game against UMass, where people will be critical of the level and caliber of opponent, I thought that the offense carried the day when the defense didn't have its best stuff.
Yeah, if I'm UMass interim coach Shane Montgomery, when I try to get this full-time job, I'm just showing them the film from this because they deserve a lot of credit. They went out there and made plays. Before I throw it to Kipp, I did want to read this quote from Kirby Smart post-game. I asked Kirby, did he feel like the defensive issues were as simple as just not tackling well or something bigger? And it went to Ben, something that you said about Malachi. Kirby said, we did not tackle well, but it was more than just tackling. It was like, I hate to say it, I just don't think that our guys were ready to play and energized to play as their guys were. Their guys wanted it more than us, and it's very rare that I could sit up here and say that. Like, they were playing harder. They were moving us. They were playing physical. They had some nice RPOs and some nice play designs, but it wasn't about that. It's I want to, like, desire. That's the biggest thing. And I think, one, that's hitting the nail on the head. I think that they thought they could sleepwalk through this and get away with it. But two, to what you said a few minutes ago, Ben, I don't sound the alarm and say, oh, my God, Georgia's in trouble because of how their defense – no, they got caught sleepwalking. I'm sure they're going to hear about it all week during this short week against Georgia Tech, and you move on from it. I think that it's not dissimilar to that Mississippi State game where they got up, and I think they kind of, took it easy on defense. And that game had all of us, and I think rightfully so, worried about the Texas game where it was really more so that defense said, that's not who we are. That Mississippi State performance, particularly in that second half, we're better than that, and they showed that against Texas. So I don't see this as a reason to panic and to freak out. But again, it wasn't a good showing. It's not to make an excuse. It's just that I don't think it's something to be worried about. Kipp, you had a chance to watch this game from home. What stood out to you? What do you want to get into? What's sort of on your mind?
I did not. Who had Carson Beck having 31 pass attempts in this game? I mean, the thing is that the offense came to play and they got it done. Carson Beck was dialed in for the second week in a row. You had a beautiful pass to Dominic Lovett in the back of the end zone. He completed passes to 10 different players in that game. I thought Jared Wilson looked as healthy as he's looked all season, and it kind of showed in the run game as well. He's just very athletic. Nate Frazier obviously had the breakout performance that, the last couple of weeks he's shown, okay, this is who we thought he was going to be and who we heard about, all the buzz in preseason camp. And, Aaron Smith, just his third 100-yard game of the season. I think he had a sneaky big play in the game. He should have had 2 touchdowns in this game. He recovered that fumble, and those refs blew that play dead, and he was running to the end zone. They still scored, but they always tell you that they keep playing, and he made the heads up move to get that ball, and then the refs just mark it down where he got it, which resulted in that 4th and 1. This is a day where we saw Michael Williams just jump up and celebrate a big havoc play while the ball was on the ground, and Georgia could have recovered that fumble. So you got to give credit to the offense. Arian Smith was the opposite of Michael Williams on that play. He was you have to have that situational awareness, and he had it on that play. And so I just think that the offense came out there and did what they had to do. The defense let everyone down, including Gunnar Stockton. This was a game where we were supposed to see the young guys play most of the second half, but yet Gunnar only got to go out there and throw 3 or 4 passes in this game because of this defense sleepwalking, as you guys said. The young guys, we talked about what we expected to see in this game. It was just, freshmen, young players, and they missed snaps in this game because this defense could not make reads, take correct angles, and make their tackles. And a team that came into this game, I think they were like 96 in yards per run. They are averaging like 3.8 a game. They had 5.7 against Georgia. Georgia had 5.6, in this game. So I think that, again, you let a team that's in the bottom, 15 in the country with an interim coach just run the ball, and no team this season, even Alabama had 173 rushing yards. They had 5.4 carry against Georgia. That was the worst game from this defense heading into this game. So yeah, in the end, Georgia almost covered. It's a game that won't get talked about overall for the season, but we're getting into that, is this who they are, or is this, again, them not getting up for this game? And I think it's the latter, but this is becoming a big concern for this defense as far as missed tackles, missed assignments, not reacting quickly enough to be able to shed a blocker and get to the ball freely. And then you had, again, just another freak play that just looked just like almost exactly like the Ryan Williams play, where Jacoby Keeney-James has that jump ball, and somehow Daniel Harris and Dan Jackson fail to make a play on the ball or tackle him. It was a freakish play, but it was just that's when you knew, okay, this is just going to be one of those days where Georgia's having to play their starters a lot longer than you thought they were. And I think that's where the missed opportunity is out there. Game reps for the younger guys. That's the overall main picture take from this, is that, again, some of the underclassmen did not get a chance to go out there and showcase their talents because, again, Georgia didn't get up for the game. But I do want to say one guy that I should have given a game ball to last week and this week, Peyton Woodring, goes out there and just makes that 53-yard field goal. He's 17 of 18 on the year now. I think his only miss is a 55-yarder. I think we know his range is 53, and he's been automatic from 53 and under. So I just think give credit to him. He's as accurate a kicker as Georgia's had. And that was, he got them points on the board on a failed drive. But I just think that is when we're looking ahead to postseason play. I think Peyton Woodring could be like that difference maker in what, will likely be some tight games Georgia plays down the road.
Kipp hit on a big thing when it came to not being able to get more guys on the field. Kirby mentioned it a few times. He was asked about Ellis Robinson and DeMello Jones, how they'd been playing, and his first thing was, wish we'd have gotten to play them more. And he said that about the walk-ons that got in late. Colin Drake was in there. I know the running back as well was a walk-on, so wish we'd have got to play more. Even, like you said, Kipp, Gunnar Stockton had 4 attempts. There's no reason that Georgia shouldn't have had an opportunity to play those guys. And I thought, that if the game went the way it should have, we should have seen Jaden Rashada out there. And there's part of me that wonders if they shouldn't have pulled Carson a little early, which became kind of a fear when he got hurt. I won't say he got hurt. He got hit, and he was feeling it afterwards. I asked Carson in the postgame if he was okay. He said, I was feeling it after that hit, but he said, I'm fine. It's football. But that was sort of a situation as he was taking his time to the sideline. We're all kind of going, oh, man, Georgia might have really messed up here. And it was at a point where, UMass was moving the ball, but nobody was saying Georgia's on upset alert. Like they had a big enough lead. They could have pulled Carson, but missed opportunity not getting more guys involved. I think Kirby knows that because, that the defense struggled and they kept UMass in this game longer than any of us anticipated. I want to roll through just a few quick thoughts and also give you guys the opportunity. Christian Miller getting hurt late in that first quarter. That's going to be something to watch. Asked Kirby about that after the game. Kirby said, quote, something with his shoulder. I'm not real sure exactly what. I don't know. I think they put it back in. It dislocated and they put it back in, but I'm not sure. That's going to be something to watch because Christian Miller has been a key part of this interior defensive line. Now, Xavier McLeod, I thought, played well when he came in. He helped Michael Williams force a fumble at one point, led to a sack that was like a 22-yard loss. But they're going to need guys to step up if Christian Miller's going to miss time. Chris Cole coming through. Gabe Harris forcing a fumble. Chris Cole returning it for a touchdown. That was Georgia's first defensive touchdown since the season opener last year when Kyron Jones had a pick six. It's funny, that was brought up on the Junkyard the other day. Someone was like, when's the last time we've had a defensive touchdown? Well, whoever that poster was, congratulations. You helped break that spell. Try to mention one of the guys on this podcast winning the lottery. Let's do something like that. Let's get some good vibes going. Other than that, other guys that stepped up, big catch for Cole Spear. Good to see not only Chauncey Bowens play, but pregame we saw Roderick Robinson and Branson Robinson running around with Scott Sinclair, the strength coach. I didn't think we would see Roderick Robinson this year. That was at least promising. We'll probably see them, I would imagine, maybe in the postseason. They may not play against Georgia Tech. Branson was a guy we thought would come back eventually, but to get those guys at least moving around pregame was a good sign. Elsewhere, did not expect Lawson Lucky and Cash Jones to be the leading receivers in terms of receptions. Those guys being productive. I think that's all I've really got on it. Offensive line played well, I thought. I think we'll continue to see Monroe Freeling at left tackle, at least until they feel like Ernest Green is 100%. He was moving with Branson and Roderick pregame and running around, getting in a little bit of warm-ups there. Saw a good bit of Daniel Harris in this one. Going to be fascinated to see if Julio Humphrey is able to bounce back and maybe capitalize on Daniel giving up that big play. I think it's still Daniel Harris's job based on how he's played lately, but that was definitely a big mistake on the back end. Ben, what about you? Anything else on your mind about this game and any parting thoughts on Georgia beating UMass?
I mean, I know you mentioned his name already, but I think Chris Cole is one of the better defense. I mean, there have been other defensive players that have broken in as freshmen. We've seen KJ Bolden, who makes a play today, big play today, stripping the ball when Nas Sackhouse is, tackling a guy that, I think sometimes we miss some of these guys that have worked their way into the rotation. I don't think anybody's missing Chris Cole, but I just wanted to give him his full props because this is a guy, when I started with Dogs 24/7, in June 2023, this was a dude that was ranked like 800th in the country or something like that. Georgia knew all along what they had with him. And he's showing why Georgia prioritized a guy that was at one point not the profile of recruit that he ended up being. And I think, he's going to be special. He is a fun football player to watch. I could watch Chris Cole tape all day long.
Kipp, what about you? Any parting thoughts from this game?
Also liked what I saw from Gabe Harris. Couple tackles for loss. He had the strip sack that Chris Cole picked up, so he kind of showed up today. You know what? Seeing Malachi, we talked about on the return game. That return he had, he looked electric. That reminded me of his high school tape where we were, people on the Junkyard would ask, is Malachi going to play some running back at Georgia? And we go, no. He's going to play safety, guys. Don't worry about it. But that he looked very natural with the ball in his hands on that return. Something that kind of, just keeping your back of your mind when, Georgia might need some hidden yards in a close game. He looks capable of kind of supplying that with them. I also just want to say shout out to Brett Thorson, his speech last week. it did not get through to the team. And his punishment for mocking them is that he was not able to even see the field. I mean, to even have a punt in this game. It's a brutal punishment for arguably Georgia's best tackler the last 2 weeks. So maybe, he might need to come in there and actually just get in some sessions with them, some film, and help him out there, because they definitely, struggled where he did not when he needed to last week. But in the end, again, this is not a game that is it's going to be a blip on the radar. I know we had some people thinking, oh gosh, is Kirby going to have to eat his words after, talking to the committee about the eye test? I get it. I mean, this was a very close game for a lot longer than it should have been, but it was never really in question. And bad wins by 38 points are not going to be what keeps the team out of the playoffs, or really should keep them out of having the ranking that they deserve in the end. But it does give Kirby plenty of ammunition going into clean old-fashioned hate, that they know they have to clean up a lot of things. They cannot sleepwalk against Georgia Tech next week, knowing that team, as been mentioned, is going to run plenty of misdirection, run multiple quarterbacks out there, and test Georgia's eye discipline. Bloody Tuesday might actually be pretty bloody this week for Georgia defense. So, you know what? You might think he's secretly happy about what he's been given, but I doubt he's happy at all. I think he's probably miserable right now, thinking about the fact that this team should have performed a lot better today. He's going to give himself the 24-hour rule, and he's probably going to be just chomping at the bit to get into that film session with these guys and show them what they need to clean up. It's really a matter of, is this defense capable of playing better than it's played this season? And I guess, we're going to find out in the next couple of games.
To Kipp's point, the big thing about Georgia Tech, you have a quick turnaround. That game is on Friday night. So I think there will be a sense of urgency in trying to answer and trying to bounce back. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're talking about the college football playoff picture with some of the games that have already ended to this point in the evening. And we'll also talk about Georgia's latest commitment and UGA Hoops' first loss of the season. All right, for those of you who are listening to this after the fact, we're recording this at about 6:10 Eastern time, so there's several games of importance for the playoff that are still going on, but the games of note that are already in the books, the biggest one, number 9, Ole Miss losing at Florida 24-17. You've got number 2, Ohio State taking care of number 5, Indiana 38-15. Number 13, SMU beats Virginia 33-7. Number 8, Miami beats Wake Forest 42-14. Some of those games that are going on as we speak, Penn State, number 4, Penn State in a tight one. As we're recording this, it's almost the end of the third quarter, 23-22. Penn State leads Minnesota. Texas is up pretty big on Kentucky. Number 21, Arizona State taking it to number 14, BYU. And another one of note, number 16, Colorado, as we're recording this, about 5 minutes left in the third. Kansas with a 30-21 lead. So I'm going to throw it to you first, Ben. What do you make of what's happened as far as the college football playoff teams that are sort of either in or on the bubble right now, what they've done in week 13 and what you think it means for Georgia?
Yeah, I think everyone in Athens is walking around doing the Gator Chomp today. I mean, I think that everybody knew that there were some things that were going to happen in front of them. And this is why some of the college football playoff discourse is just so insane to me. It's like everybody's talking about the rankings we just saw on Tuesday. Like, we got to now make indictments on every single team and what it means for every single team. Like, there's not things that are still going to happen in college football the rest of the year. I mean, we're complaining about where these SEC teams are ranked. It's like, well, one of them is about to lose to another SEC team. So it doesn't really matter, where these teams are ranked until they've put their full body of work together. And so, I think things are going to start to break Georgia's way. I think everybody in Athens right now is eyeing what has to happen for Georgia to get that home playoff game. And right now, you're going to jump Ole Miss without a doubt. There's probably a question about what's going to happen with Indiana. I think that there was enough Indiana negative propaganda this week that I think it's going to be enough for all of the 2-loss SEC teams to jump them. And that alone would put Georgia in the 8th spot, which would have them hosting a game. And if I'm not mistaken, that would have Georgia hosting Tennessee in the 8-9 game. If they were to do the rankings similarly to how they did last week. Kipp?
The issue with that is you have that 4th conference champion being ranked outside the top 8. They would jump and then bump everyone down. So while Georgia will be ranked 8th, they would actually still be a 9 seed.
In the 9 seed, yeah. So they would need some help from Penn State, which is still ongoing right now. But again, everyone felt like they knew where everyone was going to land, and we're staring Georgia at a clear road game against whoever in the face. And it's like, well, now we don't know that. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? Texas A&M could beat Texas next week, and then all of a sudden Texas falls down and it changes everything up too. So this is it's more stupid of me to suggest that people shouldn't have this discourse, because obviously people are going to have this discourse about all of these different teams and the rankings or whatever. Can we just have this conversation in 2 weeks? Can we look at what everyone does and then start poking holes in everyone's resume? I mean, I get it. Indiana had not played anyone. Everyone's been a whole week poking holes in their resume that they hadn't played anyone. When they were going to finally play somebody, it's like, can we just wait for them to lose by 23 before we start poking holes in their resume? Now it's fair to be critical of Indiana, but when they're 10-0 and they're going to play Ohio State, let's wait to be critical until after that. I think that there's going to be a few more examples of that here over the next week, but I get it. This is what we signed up for. This is what the college football playoff is. This is how we talk about college football in November nowadays. And that's just the way it's going to be forever.
Never a dull moment. And again, to this point, it feels like things are breaking Georgia's way as they've got a real opportunity to climb up. I think Georgia does jump Indiana. I think had they lost maybe 30-28 to Ohio State, you're like, okay, Indiana's just got one loss. But, I mean, come on. Indiana, I think I said this on the Thursday pod, has a 106 strength of schedule. They need to just drop them. They need to drop down. They haven't beaten anybody, and Ohio State took care of them. So, Kipp, what do you think about, Indiana, but also some of the other playoff games, the teams that are in that playoff picture, what's happened so far on Saturday?
Well, first off, to Ben's point, yes, we need to talk about these things. Do you not know how talk radio works? We have to fill a lot of air here, including our pod. So, yeah, we do need to overreact every single week. I don't want to be a part of they're not getting any respect aspect because, ESPN and all the talking heads talking about which teams aren't getting respect. You're correct in that line. There are still games to be played. But when you're going to release playoff rankings with 6 or 7 weeks still to go in the season, you have to have these discussions, or else you just put them out there and then just go straight to black and no one talks about it all week. We wouldn't have anything to discuss. And the expanded playoff, the change in the SEC structure for the conference championship, like I said, we are talking about things right now that we're not really, entertaining talking points in the previous years. It is more entertaining. The fact that we're talking about Indiana, some might say that's a negative. I would agree. I think that schedule's a joke. I think the fact that they're still going to be in line for a playoff spot, having played absolutely no one on their schedule or beat anyone on their schedule, with their signature win being that 5-point win over an average, a mid 5-5 Michigan team, is really, that's my biggest point, is not how far they should drop. They should drop out of the playoff rankings. They have not shown anything on their resume that makes it look like they're a playoff team. You're going to prove people's point that you're only looking at wins and losses and not looking at the body of work or the eye test, because they don't look like a college football playoff team. and you get them in the playoff, I think they're going to get beat by 3 or 4 touchdowns by a serious team out there. So yes, Georgia should move ahead of them. Yes, Georgia probably still needs another team to lose to host a playoff game, and they have tonight's games and next week's games and then conference championship games to decide that. I'm still, if you're Greg Sankey, you're still worried that your conference championship loser loses a spot to a team like Indiana, or if Tennessee loses a spot to Indiana. I think that is the main discussion point right now. I think Georgia is right where they need to be, and they have still a big game to worry about. But as far as the playoff is concerned, they win next week. I like their chances of hosting a playoff game. I said that last week. I think they host a Notre Dame. That's still my projection, and I feel pretty good about it as we record this podcast. You couldn't really ask for anything better. Having a game like that in Athens would be incredible for the program. I think looking at Georgia's schedule, it's the exact opposite of Indiana's. So they need to make Georgia an example so that other programs don't say, I'm not going to schedule anyone. What's the point of playing a schedule like this if we're going to get docked for it? So I think Georgia ends up being 6th or 7th, they get the host a playoff game. And, maybe they end up 5th or 6th if a couple teams get upset. But I do think, given the structure and given that we know that there's going to be 4 conference champions, the 4th one's probably going to be ranked behind Georgia, but still get a top 4 seed. I think, 6 or 7 is probably the most likely outcome here, assuming they're not playing in Atlanta.
Ben, any thoughts on where you think Georgia will be in the upcoming rankings?
Well, without knowing exactly what happens in this Penn State game, they're driving right now and they've got a 1-point lead. So I think Penn State will end up pulling that one out. So I think Georgia will move up to 8, which will slot them, like Kipp said, into that 9 spot in the bracket. But next week, there's still stuff to happen next week. And I think that, all you need is one thing to fall your way, and you got to beat Tech. Obviously, that goes without saying. But, I think that you got one thing to fall your way, and you're looking at a home playoff game, which I think would be a lot of fun in Athens.
No doubt about it. It would be a very entertaining game between the hedges. Well, Ben, you weren't with us on Thursday after Chase Linton's commitment. You were there on hand at North Atlanta for his decision. Tell us about Chase Linton, what stands out to you, and what you think put Georgia over the top in his recruitment.
Well, to start, the 24/7 Sports rankings, Georgia already had one of them. We've got Isaiah Gibson listed as our number 1 edge rusher. Darren Akinnigbon is listed as a defensive lineman in 24/7 Sports, but Georgia's recruiting him as that outside linebacker edge type. And now you've got Chase Linton in the class. All 3 of those guys are ranked inside the top 45 in the 24/7 Sports rankings. So Chidera Uzo-Diribe did an exceptional job this cycle, identifying the guys that he really wanted to go after and, successfully reeling them into the class. Chase Linton, I think, was, for lack of a better term, I think he was the luxury item in the class. You knew that they were, they went after Akinnigbon early and he committed at the spring game. You work, day and night for months to try and flip Isaiah Gibson because you think that he's one of the best defensive players in the entire class. And then it's like, all right, you're looking at numbers, you're looking at who might go pro, what you want to do. Maybe, Georgia feels like the need to add an extra edge rusher. I think that's what they saw with Chase Linton. And I think once he camped on May 31st, he ran a 40 that I'm told caught the attention of everybody on the staff who said, whoa, this guy looks the part and he's running like that. And Chase Linton told me that, that day Kirby Smart walked up to him and tapped him on his shoulder, and he said he almost blacked out. He doesn't even remember what he said to Kirby Smart, and that his big regret is not, anything that he's done other than how he spoke to Kirby Smart in that moment, because he doesn't even remember what he said to him because he was so stunned by the fact that he was talking to Kirby Smart. But I think that was the day that all of this turned. Georgia wasn't really pursuing Chase Linton heavily before that day. Chase Linton left that day early to go on an official visit to Rutgers that he committed on. So really, even on that day, I don't think it was crystal clear, this is going to be, a future partnership between these two. The more Georgia continued to push, the more Georgia kept asking him to come on campus. He returned for a second camp to work out with coaches. anytime that a recruit that's committed elsewhere is willing to come and work out with coaches so that they can see what they're actually like, it's a sign that they have genuine interest in the school. And I think that once he returned, Georgia knew, all right, if we push for him, we're going to get him. And Georgia Tech made it interesting. Rutgers tried to sort of circle back around and backdoor the recruitment at the end as well. But once Duribe and Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann really started, pressuring him in the final hours, I think that it was a no-brainer for him and a no-brainer for Georgia to take him as well. In terms of what I expect from him, I mean, he's 6'4", 215. He's going to have to add some weight to get where Georgia wants him to be. I fall short of calling him a developmental edge. I think he's someone that you would use, early in the first half of his career. You're going to use him on third downs. You're going to have him rush the passer. There's been plenty of other Georgia outside linebackers and edge rushers that we've seen that with in the past, where it's like, all right, you're going to be situationally used. And then you're going to develop that first and second down skill set over the years. And, by the end of year 2, year 3, you can establish yourself in the rotation, if you've done everything that you need to do to be successful at Georgia. And so I think he's got every opportunity to do that. He does some freaky things. I'll say this. I was at Peachtree Ridge earlier this week to go see Dennis Uzochukwu, who's the offensive tackle that is officially visiting Georgia this weekend. And those two teams played each other in the first round playoff matchup. Peachtree Ridge and North Atlanta did. And I felt that Dennis Uzochukwu got the better end of that matchup on that night. But I talked with the Peachtree Ridge coach, like, what did you think of Chase Linton from that game? He's like, when I watched film of them leading up, he just does some things that are so freaky compared to everyone else. I mean, he talked about Chase catching intercepting a screen pass on a slip screen and taking it to the house. He talked about getting past an offensive tackle and basically with 3 fingers just bringing a guy down by his shoulder pad. And so when you talk to coaches that have scouted and game planned against him and they say things like that, I think you have to take, those words to mean something and be significant. And so, I think that Chase Linton is someone that I don't know is going to be a day one impact guy for Georgia, but he has a lot of the tools that Georgia likes from that position group.
Get ready to wrap this up. Georgia men's basketball minute, 80-69 loss on Saturday morning against Marquette in the Bahamas. Georgia hung close, almost had the lead at halftime, and Marquette hit a 3-pointer to beat the buzzer. At the end of the day, it got to a point in the final minutes where Georgia just couldn't get any shots. Marquette had a 9-0 run, and during that run, Georgia had 1 attempt. So Marquette just dominated. Georgia had way too many turnovers, 18, a season high. Silas Demery Jr. Had 8 of those. Just had to play cleaner ball than that. 3-point shooting still a struggle for this team. Started 0 of 9. Played a lot better when it came to that after halftime, but you can't be starting games like that. I'd say on the whole, a pretty solid showing against a top 15 team, but they've got a quick turnaround on Saturday, playing number 22 St. John's, who whipped Virginia on Friday night and should have beaten Baylor in double overtime the night before. So it's going to be tough for Georgia basketball to get a win down on the Bahamas, but we'll see how they respond and see if they can steal a win before they come back to Athens. So we will wrap up the episode right there. I appreciate Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Be sure to subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube. Subscribe to the TikTok. A lot of good content with Georgia football and Georgia men's basketball in full swing. So we will wrap it up right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.